Welcome everyone to the Wednesday weekly rankings, going through a few of the players, talking some offensive schemes, maybe a bit of start-sit stuff as well too, as we dive into week one of the NFL season in, at this point, a little over 24 hours. We're going to have real NFL football games taking place, of course, Thursday, Eagles, Cowboys. We'll have the Chiefs and Chargers in Brazil Friday, and then a whole slew of games Sunday. I'm with my co-host, Jim Coventry, every Wednesday this time moving forward on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel, going over some of Jim's favorite start-sits, more or less, the guys that I think are going to be emphasized a bit more relative to the other fantasy experts out there, and we'll try to get a lot of your questions as well, too. So appreciate everyone following along, listening in every Wednesday moving forward on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We're going over these rankings, and I say these rankings, you are looking at Jim's rankings right now. You actually have a color-coded system that I think it's important that we kind of describe to the listeners as well.
Yeah, and this is what we also use for the Sunday start-sit stream, which you won't want to miss, 11 a.m. Eastern every Sunday. When I put green or red, I see like a player who's either well ahead of consensus or they have additional upside for that week. But usually it's players, like I said, I've moved up higher than most people, and I want them to draw attention. Then there are sometimes we'll talk about some of these players. Joe will pick which ones we talk about. But again, the red, I see that player as having some downside where their ranking is at. The rankings are the rankings for me, but the color codes do point out some parameters to be cognizant of.
Yeah, and well, let's kick things off right away with, I think one of your guys this year was Dak Prescott, who you drafted in the Fantasy Expo as well, probably rightfully so. It certainly felt like a windfall maybe less than a week ago after the Micah Parsons trade, which has now prompted everyone to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. Actually, the Cowboys, if they are to win football games, it won't because of run defense, Jerry Jones. It's because Dak Prescott and company have to pass a lot. If this is any different than Cincinnati Cincinnati NFC conference. Like, I think that's sort of the mindset you guys listeners should be having with the Cowboys and Dak Prescott in particular. This week, though, appears challenging. In fact, I've had to answer a few questions both on Reddit, on social media. We have the Ask an Expert page both on the RotoWire Discord and on the site itself. And I've been saying, stay away from Dak Prescott, yet you are on board with him being a top 7 play this week.
Yeah, what's important to understand is Philadelphia's defense today is not going to be their defense in 4 weeks. They have turnover in that. Remember that great pass rush last year?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Milton Williams is gone. Josh Sweat is gone. That's a big chunk of their pass rush. Jalen Carter still going to be Superman, but it changes. And also their secondary. They have a Dory Jackson at one corner spot. That's not good. And then their safety room, I am still not convinced Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship are answers. So I think that, look, you can attack this team with Ferguson. You can attack this team with whatever corner Jackson's on. And with the diminished pass rush, Fangio will get it figured out, but not in week one. So I think and the Eagles are going to score their points. And in whether they run or pass, I think the run plays are going to be so big, they're going to score fast. And so Dallas going to have to keep up here. And I think this is a game where they can. And their offensive line in Dallas, they've retooled it. It's not what it was, but it's not a disaster either.
Let's go over the specific players. I think this is the key part. If Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback in 12-team leagues, you're likely starting him. Maybe there's better options overall. But that you're going over a guy like Patrick Mahomes, which I think, unless the Brazil turf is dramatically different than it was last year for the Packers-Eagles, that was an ice skating rink, which allowed Jaden Reed to have his single highest receiving yard total last year. And you have guys like Xavier Worthy or Marquise Brown or even Travis Kelce doing the little doot-doot and then moves 10 more yards in that turf. Like, I would assume I would definitely be playing Patrick Mahomes over Dak Prescott. And if you are fortunate enough to be in a league where you decide between both, this feels like it could be. I'm just surprised that we're the emphasis is on Dak to this degree, even though I acknowledge that this Eagles defense won't be the one that we saw last year in the Super Bowl or what will probably be in October or November.
I think, again, we have to predict game script of these, right, Joe? And we're not always going to be right. We know the Chargers want to run the ball. That's what they're all about. And the Chiefs, I still believe they cannot stop the run. And Steve Spagnuolo will never sell out to stop it. You said run, because I don't want you winning with 30-yard plays. So, all that said, that's how I look at that. I think they're going to run. And I don't think the Chiefs mind running the ball either. I don't think the Chiefs always come in looking to say, we're going to come in and just go bombs away here. I think that they are very happy just to win games. We learned that last year. they didn't lean on Mahomes. They did 3 yards in a cloud of dust of Kareem Hunt and Carson Steele and all these other guys when Pacheco was up. So I think game script wise, I just don't think there's fireworks. And I don't think that this game is a shootout. So that's why I have them a little bit lower.
Let's talk about one of my favorite, and maybe it's for perverse reasons, games on the early week 1 portion of the slate, and that's the Carolina Panthers versus Jacksonville Jaguars. Whether it be Trevor Lawrence or there is a large hive-mind of people thinking the Panthers offense will be good this year, the Travis Hunter circus, we can call it that at this point too, there's a lot of things that will be answered week 1 for Jacksonville's offense, for Carolina's offense, but we still have to wait until week 1. And I think Trevor Lawrence being one of those guys that's on a fringe of a starting quarterback spot in one quarterback leagues is notable. Now, they will have Derek Brown back. They should have J.C. Horn back, the Panthers, which was one of the worst defenses in the league last year. But those guys were one of the best, two of the best players on that defense that now should be ready and available to play. So is this Jacksonville offense something that you're committed to this year, thinking Liam Cohen's going to get him going right away, much like Tampa Bay last year? Or is this more of an acknowledgement saying, I still don't think the Panthers defense will be all that good here in week 1?
Yeah, it's the Panthers defense. And the other thing is, look, Derek Brown's coming back from a serious injury. Maybe he's a full go week 1, but maybe he's going to take some time with game action because they don't do a lot in the preseason. They really don't to get you ready. And then they brought in some new people. But again, it's getting chemistry together. And so if Carolina is going to be a decent, like a top 20 defense at some point, it's not going to be there week 1. And I think that Liam Cohen's going to have enough just basic plays to exploit them. So I do have Lawrence ranked a little higher than I would have drafted him in fantasy drafts. But I do think this is a great matchup for them.
Last one for me, and this is specifically a me question. I am probably a bit overloaded on Justin Fields in redraft leagues, and yet you have him quarterback 9. It is a revenge game, both for Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields, reversed for their teams. We can acknowledge that the Jets and Steelers defense overall is good. It's the only week 1 game that is sub 40 in the total points, and I think that is acknowledging that either the offenses aren't good or the defenses are really good, or arguably both, entering week 1 with Arthur Smith and the Jets overall, with the Steelers side of things and the Jets. I would probably have Fields outside my top 12 starting quarterbacks this week. Like, I'd rather start Brock Purdy over him. I'd rather play Bo Nix. I certainly would rather play Trevor Lawrence. I think I'd rather play Tua as well against a Colts team that I don't think will be very good this season. So is the Justin Fields at number 9 among quarterbacks just recognizing what the rushing floor can do for a quarterback, or do you see something different about how offensively the Jets can attack Pittsburgh this week?
Yeah, it's the running, Joe. And when we go back to Justin Fields' career, no matter he had that 1,100 yard season, but you take all his other seasons, even last year, basically it's like an 800 yard pace rushing quarterback for a season. So when he's healthy, those rushing numbers are there, and that gives you a floor. I mean, to think he'd run for 50 yards in a game, that's like 5 free points there. And I know the Jets may not score a lot, but the 50 yards, there could be a touchdown thrown in there. So I think I see a lot of these other games where, like, I could see the Brock Purdy game with Seattle. I could see both teams being conservative, especially the 49ers with other injuries. I could see Tennessee and Denver getting out to an early run. They don't have to pass. I could see the Kyler Murray game. They run the ball as well. There's these scenarios where I see where there's week 1's weird, but I think a lot of these matchups are like leaning toward these slog along games. So I just put the rushing quarterback ahead because that part's usually not uncertain. But with the other quarterbacks, I just see so many game scripts that could be really weird this week.
Yeah, you could make an argument that there really is, outside of that Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes zone, everything else is smoothed out. And this is one of the things, if you're still drafting today, one of the reasons why you're drafting one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks, Burrow being technically the 5th one in that group. The advantage that those 4, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, again, Joe Burrow in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues, the advantage that those 4 plus 1 give you over the week-to-week possible uncertainty, or at least relative question marks for everyone. Like, I might like Trevor Lawrence a lot this week. Doesn't mean I like him all season. Whereas you can do that for a 3rd or 4th round selection in the case of Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels. Again, I know a few of you crazies are still drafting over the next 2 days, possibly even a little bit longer if you're in the NFFC, and you get kind of a free roll on Thursday and Friday. Just keep that in mind. I mean, I did my final tally, Jim. I'm not sure if you saw my Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports. I did 17 different redraft or setting lineup leagues this year. And of the quarterback roster rate, I think I had like 6 Trevor Lawrence, but I also had 3 or 4 Jalen Hurts and 3 or 4 Jaden Daniels. And I would have liked to have that number bumped up just a little bit. We play in a lot of sharp leagues. That's not always possible, but it is acknowledging this is the value of having one of those top 4 quarterbacks relative to everyone else in the league.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. It doesn't matter what game script is, because no matter what the game script is, they're part of that. Those quarterbacks are always going to be the identity of their teams. And it's not like those coaches go in saying, okay, well, we're going to ignore the quarterback this week.
Right.
No, it's not going to happen. And if they win big, which most of these, like Jackson, Allen, they often are going to win games by a lot of points, and even Jalen Hurts. Well, if they're going to win by a lot of points, the way they got to a lot of points, they already have 30 on the board by the third quarter. So they did their damage. So you could say, oh, they might not play the fourth quarter and they run. No, it doesn't matter. They've already done their damage. They could do it fast. So, yeah, that's why you like these high-profile quarterbacks.
Let's mix in a two-part question. We'll move over to the running backs. You have Jonathan Taylor, I think a little bit higher than a lot of people might have to start week one, but it's acknowledging overall Dolphins-Colts matchup. I was surprised. I just posted, or it's going to be posted a little bit later in the day, my week one over-under. I took every team against the spread, and I also took every game against the totals as well. We'll be doing this all season long on my Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports on RotoWire as well. You can get a subscription to RotoWire, 15% off. I think it's code YouTube 15, not down below right now, but typically on our videos, RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel, we'll have that code YouTube 15 for a RotoWire subscription, 15% off. The total for Dolphins Colts, for people that are pessimistic about Miami, like I am, and overall acknowledging Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson had to have a quarterback battle, that offense probably shouldn't be good. The total is at 47.5, and this is played in a dome. You would assume that the Dolphins defense will allow lots of players, whether I don't think it's Daniel Jones, but certainly Jonathan Taylor to run roughshod on that defense. And conversely, I don't mind Tua as a start this week, which you have a little bit higher than a lot of people might expect. So overall, what are you expecting game script-wise of this Dolphins-Colts game? Because, again, Tua is a little bit higher on the list relative to other people, and Jonathan Taylor is too.
So I think one thing that's really important is we just drafted. And again, high stakes players are drafting this weekend. So we get this. But we draft Tua lower. Why? Because we think he's not playing the whole season. That's why we drafted a quarterback 20, because you're going to miss 4 games. You're going to miss a month. I mean, not a month. I just said that. You missed 2 months. That could happen. So we're very concerned about that. But now it's the regular season. He's healthy. When he's healthy, look, Indy's going to have a decent defense. But Tua Tagovailoa, when he's healthy against a non-dominant team, you saw it last year. He had a string of 300-yard games. He is able to do well in a good situation. So, and they're at Indy, which is the fast track and the dome. There's no elements there. I kind of like that as well. But I just think we can't forget, on a week-to-week basis with Tua's healthy, you go into the game realizing they're able to move the ball. And we asked about Jonathan Taylor in that same game. Same thing. I was worried about Taylor. And why did I draft him lower or not at all? Because of the durability concerns. But again, he's healthy. It's week one. He showed us he averaged like over 140 yards a game in the last 5 games. Miami has some real nice pass rushers on their defense, but they really aren't a good run defending group. And that's the way you could get to them. Taylor could break off some big plays. I don't like they flipped over 2 interior offensive linemen. They do like Tanner Bortolini, though. So maybe that's not a huge drop off there. But I still think in enough of Jonathan Taylor, he's going to get that 25 to 28 carries he got down the stretch last year. And he has to produce with that.
Yeah, this is a soft cushion for the new look Indy offensive line, overall the offense with Daniel Jones. What happens with Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce? Like, how does that, I guess, Quartet as well, too, with the second-round pick from last year, A.D. Mitchell. Like, I have major reservations about the Colts. I took their, I think, under 6.5 total wins this year, demonstrably so. I think they are going to be in competition, ironically, with the Saints for possibly the Arch Manning sweepstakes come at the end of the season. I mean, I know it wasn't a great showing against Ohio State here in week 1 for college football, but this is a bad football team. Dolphins are actually like uniquely set up to be exploited by a bad offense and bad football team of the Colts. So over 47.5, I think that's actually well in play. If you could tease it down to like 40.5, you think about both teams scoring 3 touchdowns right around there. I feel really, really good about that. Let's move over to some of the ambiguous backfields. It's been a that's been a term that we have heard often over the past week or 3 or 4 weeks, whether it be the Commanders backfield or the Jacksonville backfield, and also the Cleveland backfield, which has only gotten more confusing with the Quinshon Judkins, Mary Kay Cabot report from yesterday or 2 days ago saying Judkins could possibly sign a contract this week. I don't care if he does. He's not playing very much. And if he does play at all, it's like, here's 4 dives. Like that shouldn't matter. Jerome Ford, though, is one of those guys I do think takes a step up this week against this Bengals defense. And we actually had somebody in the chat ask, would you rather start Christian Kirk or Dylan Sampson in a flex spot. And Dylan Sampson theoretically has utility in a game where people are assuming points are scored at least on Cincinnati's and possibly Cleveland's too. So what is the idea of Jerome Ford and both Dylan Sampson in terms of speculating if you should play them this week?
All right. So remember, Jerome, they're both pass catching type backs. Sampson's like a change of pace guy. Ford is a poor man's early down back. He's not good at it, but they've showed they'll use him in that. They'll give him 12 carries and that in the past. So they'll definitely do that. The beauty of Jerome Ford in this particular game is that Cincinnati is going to score their points. And look, I love the Browns defense, but it's Myles Garrett, it's Denzel Ward, who slipped in each of the last couple of years, and it's a whole lot of not so much. The Bengals practiced this offseason. Burrow was playing in the preseason. They're not coming out slow. They are scoring points. Well, guess what? We're going to see game script where it's going to be throwing the ball. That means a lot of screens to the running back too. So it's going to be a big reception game. Jerome Ford's catching 4 to 6 passes here. So that is going to be great. So I'm excited about Jerome Ford here. Sampson's a tough call because, again, I don't know what his pass protection chops. That's what makes week one tough. Yeah. I don't know what his pass pro chops are because that's going to be the thing. Trey Hendrickson's there, and they're going to want to make sure they have somebody that can at least keep Flacco upright. Not that he's the franchise, he's not, but you still want to protect your starting quarterback. So I do think Jerome Ford is a real good play this week.
Yeah, for the first 5 games last year, Jerome Ford either had 9 or 10 plus carries in those contests. At the end of the season, 10 carries against the Steelers week 14, 7 against the Chiefs, 7 for 84, and then week 16, 11 for 92. Like, Jerome Ford probably isn't a volume guy. He's not getting 25 total touches, but of the two, Jerome Ford or Dylan Sampson, we at least know what Jerome Ford has done in the NFL. Dylan Sampson, whether it be the pass blocking part of things or just how he fits in this backfield rotation until Judkins' return, I just don't want to go that direction. Like, if you're in a deeper format, you're considering starting Dylan Sampson in the first place, I understand. Like, it's not an optimal place to be, but I think Jerome Ford is certainly the one that's more logical to go ahead and play week 1, even if that ends up not being true in relation to what the Browns offense chooses to do. Overall, is Cleveland one of the worst offenses you think for this year? I mean, like, I know the Saints have been in contention. I would say the Seahawks are probably there too, although others would disagree. Like, is it universally in your mind, here's 1A, 1B, New Orleans and Cleveland?
Joe, I think I understand where you're coming from, and I understand why we throw a lot of shade in the Cleveland offense. I get that. I want to point this out. When they acquired Deshaun Watson, Kevin Stefanski had to scrap his offense. This was a 2 tight end offense. The offensive linemen blocked a lot of zone. Well, when Watson came, it changed the whole offense. The quarterback had to play shotgun because that's what Watson liked. They played spread with 3 receivers because that's what Watson liked. And they've been doing that since. Well, this year, they're going to be different. This could be more, the linemen are back to blocking. These linemen have been around, except for DeJuan Jones, the left tackle. The rest of this line's been in the system for a long time. They're going to go back to what they were good at. They're not going to be playing in their weaknesses. So the line is going to be okay. And Flacco is going to be okay. He's going to throw his picks, of course. But he's got Tillman, Judy, and Njoku. Remember, Njoku was the tight end 1 overall, 96 yards a game. Those last 5 games they played in 2023. Judkins will be there by week 3 or 4. Probably, 90% he'll be there. That seems to be the whispers. So they'll have a running back. I think this offense isn't going to certainly be a top 10 offense, but I think top 18, top 19. I think as long as Flacco's in there, and again, the picks will be there. I get it, but they're going to be able to move the ball.
Yeah, you're right. The Flacco part of things is a massive part of the equation. I mean, once Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders eventually plays, and they will this year, I think that's going to happen at some point sooner, probably rather than later. Once those two play, all bets are off. But until that point, Flacco is a competent quarterback. We saw the Colts last year. You could generate yardage, if nothing else, from that offense, and whether they are a top 25 play or top 20 play, maybe we're splitting hairs, but I would agree with you that so long as Flacco is the quarterback for the Browns, that's an offense that I think at least can generate some production. Let's stick with these ambiguous backfields.
Real quick.
Again. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick on Flacco. Flacco's played 18 games the last 3 years with the Jets, the Colts, and the Browns. Not good teams. He's averaged 1.67 touchdowns per game in those 18 games. He has been a viable fantasy starter in bad situations. He had that one bad game against Kansas City last year, but he's normally 20 fantasy points a game in almost every one of those games.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point with that too. I'm looking at the same thing that I would see. I'm hoping that the Browns offense will do what we want, and they should. This should be a pretty easy matchup against the Bengals and whatever they have out there for this week. One under-discussed backfield that I think probably warranted more conversation throughout the offseason, but a NFC East rival ended up being a bit more annoying with this, was the Giants. And Tyrone Tracy was kind of a waiver wire darling. Last year was certainly one that in our leagues, our deeper leagues, we got later on, and ended up being a really talented player for that Giants team and also for fantasy managers post-Devin Singletary injury. Singletary's still on the roster, but now Tyrone Tracy is likely competing with Cam Scatterbo for, I don't know what the touches are. And I loved the pick for the Giants, the football team at the time, because it protects them from Tyrone Tracy having to do everything. Tracy got banged up at the end of the year because of that workload. And Scatterbo can be a pass catcher and runner. You would think with the big body relative to Tyrone Tracy, converted receiver, that Scatterbo is more of the between the tackles guy. But we hear versatility and flexibility from NFL teams all the time, and Scatterbo allows that. But who gets the volume of this backfield? I'm not sure there's a correct answer right now.
So we defer back to that report from ESPN's Jordan Rain in about almost 2 months ago, but that Tracy's the lead guy. And I think he starts the year that way. And that's why I have him highly ranked at running back 24. Washington's not a bad matchup at all. Washington is an old defense, and those old players got older, and they did struggle last year. But Tracy, from weeks 5 through 10 last year, remember, Joe, he was getting 16 carries a game in those. He was averaging 5.46 yards per carry, and he was good. Now, what happened after the week 10 bye? All of a sudden he was worn out. It was too much for him because after that bye, he went down to 12 carries a game. That 5.4 yards per carry went down to 3.46, almost 2 full yards per carry drop. But if Tracy's fresh and starting the season, he'll be really productive. But it won't take long till the coaching staff says, oh, you know what, we can't do this. We've seen this movie before. So they will go to Scatterbo will get involved more as we move on. But right now for week 1, Tracy seems to be a solid play.
Yeah, I wouldn't play Scatterbo, but I think there's reservations about Tracy. So you're on board with him as a running back 2 this week.
It's number 24, so yeah,
right on
running back 2. But if we sneezed, he'd be down in the running back 3 range.
That's fair enough. So I guess for comparison's sake here, and we'll get to the Jacksonville backfield in a second, you have ETN listed a little bit lower at 32, Tyrone Tracy 24. I would rather play ETN just overall over Tracy. And I know you like ETN in this Liam Cohen offense. So is the less about ETN over Tracy, but more about the Jacksonville backfield overall? What are you expecting? Because theoretically, we talked about this with Trevor Lawrence, this should be a really good opener for Liam Cohen's offense and Trevor Lawrence. And I'm very curious what happens with Travis Hunter. But the backfield, that might not get settled until much later in the season with Tank Bigsby, Bashal Tutin, and ETN theoretically, or at least we've been told, all going to be a factor week 1.
Man, Jacksonville listed them as co-starters, Bigsby and ETN, on their depth chart. Gee, thanks. But that just clouds it, right? And I put a green mark on ETN because if they let him start and if he plays well and if they say, well, we're going to keep rolling with you, he could have a massive game here. And if they implement that screen game and it picks up like instantly, because Liam Cohen, remember, that was the big thing he did in Tampa. That screen game was like perfectly crafted. If that all works out, ETN goes off here. But it's so much narrative until I see it. And that's why I got to keep him lower. At least I've seen Tracy, when he's fresh, get that 5.4 yards per carry and be a receiver. But that's the problem. ETN was terrible last year, and I believe he's going to get there like you do.
Right.
But in week 1, I got to rank him lower because it's just all narrative, and I can't say with any more certainty he's going to have a good week 1. I wish he does, and I think he will. But man, it's hard to make that move, you know.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know if we're acknowledging how bad Doug Peterson was. I mean, truly, I don't think we can, or Prez Taylor for that matter. Like, there couldn't have been a worse combo of people to make Travis Etienne the human that he is otherwise not meant to be as a Hercules for that off. I'm adamant of that, but it is just narrative. I mean, I could be adamantly pounding the table all I want, but all I'm doing is just pointing to a story that I think will happen, not what we have seen on the field. So really good point. As somebody that's optimistic about Etienne, and unfortunately probably having to play him in a few places because I was maybe too optimistic. But yeah, I'm with you on this. I'm with you overall on this. I have 2 more questions of the backfield. Let's first talk about the depth chart heard around the world yesterday, where Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was listed as number 4 on the Commanders' backfield with Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez, 1, 2, 3, and the hottest of hot shots of all time, Mr. Bill Jacory Krosky-Merritt, was 4th among that group. Now, we have been told, and we will continue to tell everyone, depth charts don't matter, except when they back up the things that you care about. In this case, what are you thinking the Commanders' backfield is going to look like? Because, my God, that was a lot of conversation for, I think, much ado about nothing.
Joe, I'm glad you brought this up, and I want to preface it first. Caleb Johnson was listed as the number 3 in Pittsburgh behind Kenny Gainwell. And this one didn't surprise us, but RJ Harvey, I think he's been listed behind Dobbins. So the question becomes this. We have a depth chart. We don't know if the coaches are playing veteran deference. We don't know if the coaches really believe that, but we got to set fantasy lineups. And I had to move Caleb Johnson way down my rankings because if he is the number 3, and a Jacory Krosky-Merritt, if he's the number 4, if that's really what the coach thinks, it could be a 5% chance that's the reality of the depth chart. But if I don't at least factor it in my rankings, and it happens because it's in print by a head coach or a PR department, maybe, it's a problem. Right. So back to Krosky-Merritt, and I've been saying this all along, Joe. Dan Quinn already said, Chris Rodriguez is the short yardage and goal line guy. He doesn't have to tell us Austin Eckler's a passing down back. We know that. So what does that leave? Carries between the 20s, empty calorie carries. So I always said with Krosky-Merritt, you're looking at 25 to 70 yards a week with probably not much passing game involvement. So you're looking at 2.5 to 7 fantasy points a week. If he hits, because he'd have to hit the end zone on a longer run, which maybe he can, but betting against that is probably smart. So I always thought he's a risky play as it is. And Chris Rodriguez is a really good running back. And I'm not convinced that when they're both playing that Chris Rodriguez doesn't just pull far ahead of Krosky-Merritt. So I have Krosky-Merritt down at number 36 with that red tag for downside because it could be worse.
I would flip Eckler and Krosky-Merritt. I don't know like if you could scroll down a bit further, Jim, like Eckler's even further on this list with a green on his name, ironically. Like, I don't know what's stopping the Commanders from also having not just Jacory Krosky-Merritt in between the 20s, not just Chris Rodriguez, but also Austin Eckler getting 6 to 8 carries in that same range too. Like, this is the same point I made earlier in relation to the Giants. If flexibility is the buzzword in the NFL, and rightfully so, both defensively and offensively, you don't want to put a player out there, running back, receiver, tight end, a quarterback. You don't want to put a player out there that gives the defense more information than they're already going to have. And if there is this guy like Austin Eckler, who we conventionally assume to be a pass-catching guy, but they'll have data saying, oh, he actually gets about 6 carries a game, you can't just key in on Austin Eckler as the pass catcher in the same way you would Justice Hill in replacing Derrick Henry for the Ravens. Like, this is a really important thing that matters early on. And it matters early on because the data that every team uses moving forward will be implemented, including what happens week 1, 2, and 3. So savvy coaches will try to skew those things early in the season so that when people are just looking at overall data points, because we all do this, not just NFL guys, but us too in the industry. When you're looking at those data points, like Eckler will carry the ball on 24% of carries on first down, that is different week 1 than what would happen in November, but the data still all looks the same. So just keep that in mind. I will not start Jacory Krosky. I don't have him anywhere because I was thinking things through a little bit easier than some folks might. We'll put it that way, Jim. I don't have Jacory Krosky-Merritt many places, but I do have Eckler in a few, and I will competently, happily take Austin Eckler as a flex play if I need to this week.
And don't be surprised. All right, Chris Rodriguez, the goal line back, I get that. But if they're on the 5-yard line and they don't want to tip off to a run, to a defense that can be run or pass, then you put Eckler in the game because Eckler could run it from there, Eckler could catch it, or they could pass to a wide receiver or a tight end. It keeps you from being predictable. So Eckler could score a touchdown. It wouldn't surprise anybody in this game too. But yeah, I do like Eckler here, and I have his upside running back 40, of course, because we don't know the full role. The touches are going to be limited. But like you said, can't agree with you more. Eckler is somebody you should look at, depending on your roster. You're not starting him over, Aaron Jones or something like that, although it's not probably terribly crazy to think you could, but you're not. But if you have a questionable spot, Austin Eckler should be in consideration.
He's in flex play range for sure. And I'm looking at the receiver list right now, and I say, okay, a lot of these guys feel more or less cut and dry. That where you draft them, where the ADP was, I don't have major question marks. We'll get to a few, in particular, Ricky Pearsall, Emeka Egbuka as the hot risers over the past 2 or 3 weeks. But I want to save, because I'm going to go less on receivers, at least in week one, let's talk about one more backfield that I have questions about, and I'd imagine other listeners do too, and that's the Texans backfield. With Nick Chubb theoretically replacing Joe Mixon for, we know, at least 4 weeks. I think possibly longer, but we know at least 4 weeks. Then there's people who like Woody Marks, and I think he should be rostered in more leagues than he currently is. Go ahead and check out my waiver wire article right now where I talk about Woody Marks. That's up on the RotoWire site. Again, RotoWire YouTube 15 gets you 15% off subscription to RotoWire. And then there's also Dameon Pierce, who a couple years ago was a dynasty darling, and I think has kind of soured a little bit. You have Dare Gumbawale factoring as the pass catcher too. If the idea is among all these rookies, we think the coaches will probably slow play them a little bit. Woody Marks can be the best pass catching specialist you want him to be, and he's still a early day 3 selection that you probably have reservations about. So in my mind, Nick Chubb is probably going to see his most snap total, highest snap total, this week and the next couple weeks, right? Or how are you seeing this Texans backfield?
Yeah, this is a tough one, and you rightfully bring it up. And I have to think, when you're game planning for the Rams, based on what you saw at the end of last season, they may have been in a hot streak, but that pass rush was real. And that offensive line in Houston, not real. It's a problem. So I think number one is keeping C.J. Stroud upright. Nick Chubb can pass protect. It's a big dude. They might need him on more passing downs than usual because of that. I don't know where Woody Marks is at in his development as a pass protector, but I know this is a tough ask going against the Rams in week one. This is a real pass rush right now. And so you gotta be aware of that. So like you, I'm nervous about Marks this week. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be a good pass catching back, but I don't know if you want to expose him out in week one with that Rams pass rush. So I do think Chubb sees quite a bit of work. Look, I'm a Nick Chubb apologist. Everybody listen to me, you know that. I'm always going to have the glass 99% full on Nick Chubb. So take it with a grain of salt. But I do think he gets 12 to 14 carries here. I don't know what he does with them because he's 5 for 25 in a useless preseason game against a useless defense. Yep. But at least he did it. At least he wasn't 5 for 1. So I'll give him that. So he at least did something. So, but to think Nick Chubb can't get you 50 yards in this game, I think he can get you 50 yards.
I'm with you on that. Let's move over to the receivers. And we didn't talk about, I think, one of the more interesting early afternoon games, which is the Buccaneers and Falcons. Falcons won both of those games last year. Remember that barn burner, week 4 or 5 overtime game, and then surprisingly beat the Buccaneers, who ended up going to win the NFC South Division a little bit later on. Our guy, Uncle Ted, asked us overall, you don't like Penix over Tampa Bay in a shootout? Let's just talk about game script. We don't have to go back quarterback with Baker Mayfield, Michael Penix, but in the case of Mike Evans, the case of Emeka Egbuka, what we think from Drake London, overall, with both Tristan Wirfs and Caleb McGarry, certainly Caleb McGarry not playing for the Falcons, he's done for the year. Overall, what do you anticipate from this kind of a pivotal and important NFC South divisional battle here in week one?
So I do want to talk about the Penix thing for a second. You mentioned right tackle Caleb McGarry, blindside protector, is not going to be there. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what the Buccaneers are going to do regardless. Todd Bowles is going to blitz. And they got Hassan Reddick back. And I don't know if he's the same pass rusher he was a few years ago, but it's better than what they had last year. This team is going to send pressure at Penix. And if Penix doesn't have his right tackle, and he's going to be seeing pressure all day, Penix is good in one area, deep passing. You may not have time to deep pass here. His short and intermediate passing are brutal, horrific. His coaches have said it. It came up in the preseason. Kirk Cousins looked better.
It's literally flip a coin. I mean, people understand 50-50. Is it heads or is it tails? Will the 6-yard pass be complete to Bijan Robinson? Flip a coin. Right. That's what it feels like right now with Michael Penix.
And those short passes, even if he completes them, they're off target. Bijan Robinson averaged 2 catches for 8 yards. It was a small sample of 3 games. 2 catches, 8 yards. That's your great breakaway pass-catching running back. So Penix is in trouble in this one. He's in big trouble in this one. Drake London will get his, but because they'll be the passes he'll complete some passes. But Penix is in big trouble here. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm with you. And so the over/under I think was set at 47.5, which makes sense. Again, I talked about that barn burner back in probably early October between the Falcons and Buccaneers. Falcons won in overtime. They both, I think, scored 30-plus points. That it's week one. Typically, even a veteran team like the Buccaneers, you assume things stall out a little bit. Like week one, you're still installing things overall offensively, or you're not in the same rhythm that you would be in October, November. is this actually going to be a shootout? Or is it realistic to say, hey, Emeka Egbuka, who's a very popular start right now. In fact, I did the Reddit Ask an Expert last or 2 days ago, whatever it was. I've said Emeka Egbuka in a lot of places I would play, but that's dependent on volume. So are you of the belief that there probably won't be volume from the Buccaneers side of things, or is there going to be points on both sides that sort of warrant getting as much play as you can from either team?
So those who are watching, we look to the right of your screen. You'll have a thing called script. Under green, I have Cincinnati and Cleveland, and I think that game is going to be fertile for scoring. You see at the bottom in red, I have the Pittsburgh and the Jets game. I think that game script's going to be brutal. The ones in yellow have a big number of range of outcomes. One is a shootout, but the other one is Atlanta's defense is not good. And Tampa Bay may still be able to run the ball. Remember, Tristan Wirfs is out the left tackle here. And I know Atlanta is not much of a pass rush. So I still think Baker is going to be fine here. But Tampa Bay could come in and want to run a little bit more than usual. And that may work. And Atlanta may not want to get Penix in those second and long and third and longs. So, but they still got to trust a run game to see if they could get enough out of Bijan to at least get him 5 yards on first down. So I see so many scenarios here. There are a few players I think are going off in this game, but I'm very concerned about the so many possibilities here. I can't find one game to say this is what's going to happen. This one could be all over the board, Joe.
This is something I worked on all of last night and early this morning. I picked every game against the spread, every total as well too, and I was surprised at how many of these I was just like, oh yeah, like the team that I think will cover will win. That's not normally how it happens from betting perspective. Let's just say, for example, Eagles Cowboys, I think at this point is now either 7.5 or 8.5. I think the Eagles win. I think it's one of the few situations where maybe the Cowboys do cover that spread, but I think the Eagles win. Cardinals Saints, for example, Cardinals 6.5 points. I think the Cardinals probably win by a touchdown. Most of the week one slate goes out that way. The one that I had a hard time with was, I think the Buccaneers probably should win this game. The Buccaneers should beat the Falcons. I don't know if I feel great about that. And it's less to do about Michael Penix, and I think both teams missing their crucial tackles in the case of Caleb McGarry on the right side, but also blocking the backside of Michael Penix, and Tristan Wirfs, one of the best tackles in the league, likely not playing week one against the Falcons. It's more that I don't know. And I can sit here and be an expert and act like I'm aware of whatever possibly could be happening and do the Doctor Strange, I've seen a million different situations type of deal. I don't know what's going to happen from this offensive system either way in week one. And I actually feel confident saying whatever occurs September 8th, whatever the date is not a reflection of either team. Talk to me in November what the Buccaneers and Falcons look like.
Yes. Now, I will say this. Play Mike Evans at DFS. Bet is over prop. Because here's going to be the thing. No Chris Godwin. Jalen McMillan, obviously, out to week 9. We like the idea of Egbuka. Cade Otton's practicing. He apparently was supposed to miss weeks. If he plays, he'll be very limited. We know Baker Mayfield, even though his left tackle's out, we know he's throwing the ball to Mike Evans. Look, I like, the corner from Terrell, A.J. Terrell. I like A.J. Terrell, but not against Mike Evans. And I don't think that the pass rush in Atlanta, the secondary. So when targets go, Mike Evans should have himself a very strong opener. So he's a player I feel real strongly about. But otherwise, Joe, everything else you said, spot on. I do want to point out one thing. The chat's going on about this left tackle, right tackling. Let me just clear this up for everybody. The NFL's changed. Quit citing data from 10 years ago. Teams don't rush their best pass rusher only against the left tackle or against the blind side. Teams are smart now. Defenses move personnel. You'll see Myles Garrett one play lineup on the left. Next play lined up on the right. Doesn't matter. They will find what they perceive to be a mismatch, and they will line up there. And the blindside protector still is important because defenses could go after them with any combination of defenders they want. Teams send simulated pressures. This is no longer the world of before. So all these things you're throwing out there in the chat about, how teams are going to rush, where they're going. No, watch the games. This is all changed. This is NFL changes all the time.
It's fine. It's good conversation. Nevertheless, I think it's we're ignoring key data points, but that's all right. Let's move over to Chris Olave, who is I think he was tied for my most drafted player and a guy I have 60% exposure to in best ball. Don't do that, ladies and gentlemen. That is not how you play correct best ball, is having 60% exposure to a guy like Chris Olave in the 6th or 7th round, but you have him relatively high, which makes me feel pretty comfortable. There is some slight optimism in the Cardinals overall this year, certainly from a betting perspective as a possible playoff hopeful. I will say I have reservations about the Cardinals overall. Maybe it has something to do with Kyler Murray in particular, who I just don't think is that quarterback. But I also don't know if the defense is that great, and they certainly weren't great last year. So everyone wants to hem and haw, probably rightfully so, but Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck, one of the worst quarterback competitions of all time, being settled 2 weeks ago with Spencer Rattler named your starting quarterback. But the reality of the situation is, in the year 2025, you can have bad quarterbacks like Jacoby Brissett or Desmond Ridder still have relevant fantasy outcomes for their top targets. The key is they have to be good. And we were drafting Chris Olave as a mid-second round pick last year. So as long as Olave is healthy, we've had this conversation with Tua, as long as Olave is healthy, he probably should be in your starting lineups this week, right?
100%, Joe. Correct on that. Chris Olave in his career, when he has had 6 or more targets in a game, he's like money for 80 yards. He's that good. We drafted him lower because of the worry about the concussions. Your point is out. But when he's on the field, you have to treat him for who he is. You're not taking the concussion into factoring when you're doing the weekly rankings. You're saying, oh, I got Olave healthy this week. And you assume he'll finish the game healthy. That's the way we have to go about him. And with the quarterback, you're right. Every team is going to mostly throw for at least 170 yards in a game. That's almost going to be the baseline. And this is a very narrow tree of pass catchers. Olave, Shaheed, a little Juwan Johnson, some screens to Alvin Kamara. But the point is, Olave is going to be the short and intermediate winner for them. And he's proven he can beat big-time coverage when he sees it. Not that he's going to see it this week. And Shaheed can do a lot of things, but he's his best going deep. And I don't know that they're going to want this young quarterback, Spencer Rattler, holding the ball to throw it deep. So I think Olave is very well positioned for a high volume game. You're looking at 7 catches. You're looking minimum. And I always say he's money for 80 yards, even if you downgrade to the 60. You're 7 for 60. He'll take that all day long. But I think if he gets the 7 catches, he's going to hit 80 yards because that's what Chris Olave always does.
I love his over right now. You can get on DraftKings like close to 60 or 67 yards receiving. It's a great parlay builder. Again, you're worried about the concussion part of things that can happen at any play. When he's available, Chris Olave is in your starting lineups every single time. Let's talk about a few of the flex plays at receiver, and we'll go back to one of the original questions we had about Dylan Sampson or Christian Kirk. You have a little bit, if you could scroll a bit further down in there, Christian Kirk listed as the green in there, and I think rightfully so. Everyone wants to just poo-poo Christian Kirk because he's injured and he got that ridiculous contract that wasn't warranted. But when Christian Kirk is on the field, he is a really good receiver. And it's like nobody wants to acknowledge that because he's been injured and had a dumb contract from Jacksonville. I will be playing Christian Kirk in a ton of leagues this week and was probably the quintessential undervalued, actually good veteran. The way people were drafting Cooper Kupp is the way they probably should have been drafting Christian Kirk. So let's go over this conversation here with the Texans offense and CJ Stroud and Christian Kirk in particular.
Yeah, Christian Kirk, very, very good player, like you said. He's a player I targeted in drafts about pick 100. And I do have him as upside here. Again, the ranking's low at 46. First game with CJ Stroud, so we don't really know what the chemistry is yet. But in terms of game planning, I mentioned this earlier. The Rams should be able to bring a pretty significant pass rush. What does that lead to? Your slot receiver. Even if he plays on the outside, they're going to be over the middle targets. He's going to be running in breakers. So Christian Kirk should be the natural recipient of some of these quicker passes. He is good at changing the play, improvising. He's good at improvising. Right. And CJ Stroud's going to be able to find him. So I do think there's upside here. Kirk could have himself a game, but I have to rank him at 46 because, like I said, first game with the quarterback, we really don't know. Nico Collins, if the pass rush is getting home, it might be harder to get him some of the more downfield targets. So Kirk should be in good position here. The reason of the low ranking, again, this could be a low-scoring game. Don't be surprised if this Houston Rams game ends up 17-13. Yep. So that's why Kirk's ranked a little lower. But like you, Joe, I see the upside.
Yeah, I think that's a great call that if we were to kind of tease the under, which I think was set at 42.5, if I remember correctly, let's say it's at like 35 or 34 if you want to get a bit lower. Well, you would go the other way. You want more like 51. Like I would sooner assume like you that it's a 30 total game between the two teams than a 50 total game between the two teams. And I'm right there on that same sort of vein. I want to talk about one more receiver and then we'll have time for a bit more of a tight end conversation. But I had mentioned the ice skating rink that theoretically could be available come Friday in Brazil between the Chiefs and Chargers. I had said Xavier Worthy is kind of interesting to me in this sort of scenario, much in the same way Jaden Reed was in week 1, where he led the league in receiving yards for that week. I kind of wonder if Marquise Brown is not just an automatic plug and play in this sort of format. Like, if the concept is that, hey, it's going to be low scoring, we have no idea what the altitude is, and what if we don't want to have people going crazy in this track rink, so we'll just run the ball and both sides do it. But if this does become, hey, we got to score quickly, it's Xavier Worthy, which I think will have an extra amount of attention come Friday, and then probably Marquise Brown is like the fill-in Rashee Rice slot target that I think is really interesting this week.
So remember this last year, Xavier Worthy started the year as a deep threat, which he was drafted to be. Mm-hmm. Rashee Rice gets injured in week 3, and then about week 10, the Chiefs moved Xavier Worthy into the Rashee Rice role, and you were seeing almost 20 PPR points plus per game. Week 18 game, they didn't play their starter, so I think he had a couple snaps. Don't count that game, of course. But so Worthy will start the year in the Rashee Rice role, and that's a really, really productive role. So I do think Worthy is in great shape for week 1. You do astutely mention the idea of next receiver, Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown is going to be an intermediate threat to challenge the verticality of the safeties. Teams will play safeties high against Mahomes. Well, if you can get a receiver that goes behind the linebackers, and Hollywood Brown's always had that ability, but once the ball's in his hand, his speed is still game-breaking. Again, health is the issue with him. He's healthy right now. Right. So I do think it's a very good bet that Hollywood Brown is going to be the primary intermediate receiver in this game. And I could see even on 4 catches, I could see him getting in the 60-yard range.
The only tight end that I was going to quibble about, and this was Jonnu Smith and Colston Loveland in particular, I think the 1 through 12 makes sense. We've talked a pretty good amount about Jake Ferguson overall, why he benefits in this Cowboys attack. David Njoku being overall an offensive game that we anticipate, and David Njoku was tight end 1 over the final 5 games of the season. Jonnu Smith was being drafted outside the top 20 tight ends. Certainly had fallen down post-trade to the Steelers. But I don't know what people are thinking about this, because it really is only DK Metcalf, right, and then Jaylen Warren. And even in the event that Aaron Rodgers is one of the worst quarterbacks of all time and can't make more than 20 pass attempts, there's still probably 7 around. And it's not Pat Freiermuth. It's not whatever slot target they want to talk about as baloney like Roman Wilson. It's going to be the guy that they thought was vital, that Arthur Smith has proven time and again he wants to touch the ball. They're doing weird stuff in the backfield with Jonnu Smith as well. Jonnu Smith is probably going to be one of those tight ends, once again, that surprises folks fantasy-wise and gets more volume than you would anticipate throughout the season.
Joe, it's a great call. And he's had this injury in the offseason. He hasn't been cleared from the injury report, so I have him a little lower than I normally would. I'm at 14, but I put the upside. That I think it's a knee injury he's been dealing with. But if he comes out clear for this, watch out. 2 years ago in Atlanta, Smith was the second tight end behind Kyle Pitts. Smith at the time had a career year, 580 yards. That was a good season as a secondary tight end. And when you take the tight end role that year in Atlanta 2 years ago between Pitts and Smith, it was almost 1,200 yards between them. Well, Smith is going to be the lead tight end. And like you said, there is no second receiver of consequence. Like you also said, they brought Smith in for a reason. He is going to catch a lot of those short passes. Look, the big dude, Darnell Washington's going to be in there to block. Freiermuth's going to be more of a blocker than receiver. People bailed on Jonnu Smith thinking Arthur Smith was a problem for tight ends. No, he's a boost for tight ends. People just totally don't understand this one.
Specifically his favorite one, Jonnu Smith. All right. Like, I mean, this is a specialized instance in which, and I hate when teams do this in the NBA. This happens infrequently in the NFL, but still does. Well, this specific guy really fits my scheme, so we need to go ahead and get this scheme, even though the scheme can change year to year because Arthur Smith stinks. Or Aaron Rodgers won't be there another year, and we'll just try to change everything again because they probably should. Like, whatever it is, I think that the process for the Steelers is dumb, but fantasy-wise, it makes a lot of a difference. And Jonnu Smith, the only issue was, Jim, that I love Mason Taylor almost as much as I love Jonnu Smith, and I've been drafting a lot of Mason Taylor. I've had to make that my namesake at this point in a few leagues with the roster ability that I've had. But I think Jonnu Smith is very quietly still in top 12 consideration each and every week. So is there anybody else you want to mention? Otherwise, I think we're probably good for this week.
Yeah, David Njoku, if you're playing DFS, if you're playing props, just roll on the fact that Flacco has a chemistry. Flacco hasn't played significant snaps of Cedric Tillman. Tillman's on the team, but he wasn't involved. Jerry Jeudy was not with that team in 2023. But those last 5 games, Njoku played with Flacco. Remember, he's averaged 96 yards per game, 10 targets per game. Flacco has chemistry with him, and Njoku is a very good player. He's healthy right now. Again, that's the thing. Health is the ding on him. He's healthy right now. David Njoku, I have him as the tight end 5 with upside to even get in there with the big guys this week.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Well, I hadn't thought about the Flacco part of things, but as we're describing it more, and again, acknowledging the Bengals defense is going to be as bad as we think it will, even though they brought back Trey Hendrickson finally. Like, this is, I'm with you overall on this. So that does it for us in the Wednesday edition here of the weekly rankings, more or less. We're going to be doing it about the same time every single week moving forward. Stick around the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We got a bunch more content, both video-wise, podcast-wise, live shows coming up. If you're still getting your drafts ready, we have a lot of content on the RotoWire site. We have the Week 1 waiver wire article up for myself. I've been updating that throughout the week. Jim's got tons of content coming up. Can we just go over this real quick? Like, what is your schedule over the next couple of days? Like, what should, if they need more Jim Coventry, what should they do?
I pinned to my X my weekly content schedule. I made it real easy. There's links to the shows. Start Sit Show on Sunday. The XM shows are pinned there. The Sunday streams. I do a waiver stream at halftime at a Sunday night game. I do a reactions video after the late games and before the evening game. Articles on rotowire.com. Like Joe told you, 15% off. Use the code YouTube 15 for that one, and 3 articles a week there. But yeah, it's just check my X, because that's where it's pinned. Everything there. You'll see the days I answer questions for people on X are there. Usually it's early Monday. I'll answer waiver questions. Thursday and Saturday before 4, I'll answer lineup questions.
Again, Jim Coventry, NFL. On X there. Go ahead and check that out. All right. We'll be back in next Wednesday going over more of this stuff. Best of luck to everyone in their lineups. And thank God we got football back.